Joining us now is Jonny von Wallström, the director of the Film of Africa.
What's up? Still doing this with OBS or whatever it's called. Everything seems to be working as of now. I had some hiccups. Somehow there was like an issue with the Ultra Studio thing. I don't know if it was because I had it in like 30 FPS and it should be in 25 and everything, but it couldn't find the camera. Now it works. But yeah, that was a hiccup. So I'm just gonna get the chat up. Yeah, I thought I'd talk about two things outside of these questions, and actually I should record this, right? Should record this in high resolution, probably. Let me just check. Rec is on. I forgot it one time before, and that was not a good thing. So, two things. So let me know in the comment section what you think, and I'll kind of elaborate what I think on it as we go along. First of all, Prores Raw. I finally had some time to kind of catch up on the whole thing, because I was super interested, but I didn't really study up on how much of an impact it could have. So what do you think about Prores Raw? And the other thing, IGTV. What do you think about it? Is it something that you're gonna use? Are you gonna use it for storytelling, or how do you see the platform kind of being useful as a filmmaker? I'm actually pretty interested in it, but I've also just started to kind of work in that way with stories, so I'm super psyched on the whole platform. But let me know in the comment section what you think, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But first question comes from Instagram. And if you haven't found me on Instagram, creativenorth.tv is the place where you should be hanging out. A lot of story stuff is also there, and pictures, that type of Instagram stuff. But also IGTV, of course, just one video so far. What was your first experience with a camera or with making videos? How does your non-film life experience shape you as a filmmaker? I think, trying to remember here, but I think the first experience was my dad had, what was the first camera he had? I don't even remember, but he shot a lot when I was young, so I had that relationship that most people do to like their dad shooting stuff, and like he shot every vacation, that sort of thing, and that was kind of fun and like a way of getting introduced to filmmaking. I think that the fun thing about it is that there's a nerve in that type of stuff, like family photo, family type of archive stuff, that is like authentic and real, and that's something that I'm trying to kind of tell stories about today. So it probably has like some useful experience in growing up like that. That's probably something that we as humans value, that type of archive stuff, because we grew up on it and have a relationship to it. I don't know, that's just like my thoughts. Might be that, I don't know, it's totally just random, but that was probably the first experience. Second one was when I was in high school, and I was put in this like help class for like kids that couldn't read or write Swedish or English properly. I was fluent in both, but I came back from the States, so I was put in that class because I didn't want to read up on my German. Too boring. So I was put in that class. That was like total mess. So they brought a VHS camera, or one of the teachers did, and then we started making films there. That was the first experience. That was real like filmmaking experience. That's probably the first time. I was not at all interested in filmmaking or in arts or anything. I was like a sports jock type of dude. So that was much later that I was introduced to that whole thing and was like kind of thinking of it as a profession. But then how does your non-film life experience shape you as a filmmaker? Like everything, totally everything shapes you. Like all your experiences in life. That's why somebody that isn't 30 at least can rarely make a story for a feature film that has any meaning to any other person on the planet Earth. And that's just because you haven't lived life enough. Like, certain people do that. There's this Canadian dude that is like super talented, Xavier Dolan. Yeah, he's one of those people that can do that. And most people can't, just because they haven't lived and had enough experiences to kind of transcend your own personal thoughts to other people, to make it universal. He can, apparently, and he has like won many prizes off of his work. But that's something that shapes you as a filmmaker. Like, what you do in life shapes the direction you take in terms of stories, in terms of whatever you want to do. So that's, I would say, everything. When you define a style, all your experiences in life shapes and forms that. So to me, it's like everything that makes you unique. Yeah. What do you think of the new Blackmagic Pocket camera, which will come out soon? Super psyched about it. Probably gonna have it as early as I can. I really want that camera. According to Maddie, who's felt it when at NAB, I think, it was a bit bigger than what he expected. And I think for me, I just want it to be smaller than a cinema camera, but with the power of a cinema camera. I want it to be like a handheld camera. I don't think that a C300 or a Ursa or like a Arri or anything like that is handheld. It's definitely not handheld. It's something that you need an easy rig or something for. So I want it to be a handheld camera, but it's fine that it's big as like a 5D or something like that. That's the type of size that I love. I loved shooting on the 5D, the Canon cameras, just because of the size. Like, it's sturdy. The bad thing about it is that it doesn't have water or protection of any kind that's decent. So it's not as sturdy as like a 5D, which I love about that. And I did love it about the GH5 that's somewhere around here. But that one broke anyways, so it doesn't really matter if it breaks, just because of the flip screen that everybody wants. Of course, that's the thing that breaks, because people don't make it, like Blackmagic doesn't want to make it, because of those reasons. But still, I want it. I want that in the Blackmagic camera. It doesn't have it. I still will kind of live with that, because I want that type of camera. So for most situations where I shoot stuff, documentary, I want to have that camera. That's the camera that I will go to as my A camera. But for the stuff that is like a feature doc, or where I'm making stuff for commercials or that sort of thing, there's a proper reason for having a big equipment and having those assists that Easy Rig or something like that has, or kind of offers you. So then I would probably not have it as an A cam. Then it's probably go down to a B cam. For vlogging, I doubt that I will use it, just because you need that flip screen. But I don't know, with a small monitor, somebody has advised me on some here. I don't remember what the brands are, but like, I want the tiniest monitor that you can have, with like the easiest form factor that you can just have it as a flip screen, but without it being that. If I could add that, then maybe I would use it as a vlogging camera, but I doubt it. It's probably going to be a B cam that rarely gets used as this, because it's probably ridiculously big, and it's also no flip screen. Yeah, but audio also, very important. Shooting in ProRes, super important. I think I talked about it in the last, no, like two times ago, with the Q&A that I did in Toronto. I talked about the encoding times. When you shoot in ProRes compared to like the C300, like, the computers can't handle that format. MXF formats or any like H.264 or anything like that takes like a bunch of computer power to encode. So that's why it takes much longer times to render it. So I used to export these as the C300 files, and that used to take 4 or 5 hours. And with the ProRes 444, which is higher in resolution and higher in bitrate and all those things, takes 15 minutes. So it's ridiculous. If you want to do stuff with a quick turnaround, ProRes is definitely the way to go. And that kind of, yeah, maybe I should talk a little bit about like ProRes Raw then, because ProRes Raw has all that, like all the raw capabilities. I've heard people shoot with it that has tested it, that have like totally blown out everything and they were able to bring everything back. I will doubt that until I see that for myself. But if it's that powerful, then it's insane, because it's going to be lighter than the ProRes 444. I think they talked about it being like ProRes 422 or something in size. So if that's the case, if you can get that size but still have the latitude of shooting in RAW, everybody will want to use it. And I'm hoping that Blackmagic gets on that train, but for now they're not. So you're not going to see that, I think, anytime like soon in those cameras, but probably next year, I don't know, just guessing here. But I think it's a big deal with the ProRes Raw. Let me just see if somebody has said anything about it. ProRes Raw. I think like the biggest thing with ProRes Raw is definitely like the capability of shooting in a format that doesn't need proxies. So you can shoot in the highest bitrate, which is why I don't like, for instance, the Sony cameras and all those like DSLR-like or mirrorless or whatever it is, any camera that shoots compressed. I don't like them because they compress the image. I don't even like, okay, C300 is fine. It compresses like not that much, but it does compresses. But the C100 is an issue for me because it's too compressed. And that just brings like all the latitude that you have in the camera that it's capable of. They just throw that away. You get too sharp of an image that becomes like a lot of artifacts when you grade stuff. That's what you want to avoid. And you don't want to do stuff in the camera. You don't want to process anything if you have a grading workflow. So that's why I think like ProRes Raw is totally like insanely much the future. Because if you want to shoot like high res, if you want to shoot 4K, to me there's like almost not worth it shooting in 4K. We're shooting the new dock in 4K just because of like having it future proof and all that, but it's not worth the hassle if I had a choice. It's just because I know that like if we want to sell it to Netflix, we better have that just in case. But in terms of latitude or in high, like resolution, I don't need that for having like the picture quality that I want. So yeah, that's that, I guess. But I also think about it in a way that I want to shoot in 4K and zoom in, not because I can't frame stuff, because I hate that aspect of shooting in 4K, but I want to shoot it in 4K so that I shoot a little bit wider than I usually do, so that I can use it for like Instagram and portrait mode. Because that is like a big thing. You don't want to shoot like, I don't want to have a camera that one time I have like this and then I tilt it just to shoot like specific things. I'd rather have one that's like landscape all the time, and then you can kind of use that because you shoot a little bit wider and then you zoom in. That's how I'm thinking about it, and with IGTV it makes even more sense because you want to do stuff that's original there, but you don't want to shoot stuff specifically for that. At least I'm not interested in telling stories that way. And if you have ProRes Raw, you can actually do those things, because ProRes Raw has all the latitude that you want in an image, but it has the lightweight of a compressed DSLR-like file, which is amazing. I don't even know how they did that, but yeah. Okay. What contributed to your pretty unique style of filmmaking, and how has that developed over time? What were your videos like when you started compared to now? Thank you. I think everything affects you. Like, you have things from like what you do in life and what you do as a profession. So I worked in television, I worked in advertising, I worked in documentary, I worked as a DOP, I worked as an editor. And then eventually I started direct things. Having that way of like a career, which is like doing everything. I've done everything, I would say, because I've sound mixed and I've graded and I've done all those things for a lot of the TV stuff, just because that's how it's done there. So when you learn all those things, and on top of that, I also studied digital post-production and like I taught editing and that sort of thing. But with that experience, you kind of, that affects, or it shapes what you do in terms of what stories you tell. So for instance, first I got bored off of making anything that was digital. So I just hated the whole aspect of doing 3D animations because I studied that. So I just wanted to move away from that. I wanted to do like realistic stuff. First that was fiction, but then eventually that kind of shaped me into wanting to do docs. So that's probably one thing that affected me, studying one thing and then eventually realizing that this is not what I want to do, and then going towards or pursuing what I want to do. First that was photography, so then all of a sudden I realized that, yeah, maybe this is a profession that I would like doing. So I started as a photographer, a stills photographer. Then I moved into film, which was what I studied before, but I worked as a photographer first, and then I kind of progressed into being a DOP. And then eventually I started to kind of get tired of the whole advertising world, and then mainly because I just had shit type of work. And then eventually that led me to pursuing like a TV career, and that kind of shaped my narrative storytelling. So when you work in TV, you have to kind of be on point because you don't have a lot of shooting days. You can't shoot like you shoot a documentary with like all the time in the world because you're the one that dictates things. You have like a set number of days. You have a set number of like time for editing each episode. All those things are set. So you need to work from that, and then you need to get really efficient with what you do. And that kind of taught me how to work as a YouTuber, I think. Because nowadays, when I work with advertising and when I work with YouTube, I work in a similar way like I did in TV. So all those experiences, you need to have those to shape whatever style or whatever you have eventually going for yourself. And working with other people, like me working with other directors and that sort of thing, and like even editors or like colorists, sound mixers, all those things have taught me how to do it myself. So I've always been like eager to learn all those things for me to be able to tell stories better. It's not that I always want to do all those things, but it's so that I know what to talk to or how to talk to the people that I want to do stuff or want to kind of realize whatever vision I have or something. I think those things are really important to think about how you're gonna kind of what experience do you need to get to where you want to go. Or what do you always should kind of approach things like, how do I develop through doing stuff rather than like reading up on things or like waiting to get your chance. You should always like think about like, what can I develop and pursue those things. Eventually you're ready to do like bigger stuff, and then you go and do that. Yeah, I think that's probably the main stuff that affected me. But then you also have like, what movies do you like? What type of stories do you like? Where are you from? Like the Scandinavian quietness or whatever, or the moody type of Scandinavian washed out, dark type of stuff. That's usually something that we like. That's also the stuff that you're gonna see me pursue, because that's like where I grew up and it's the stuff that I have. The reason I do it in English is because I have an international career and I lived in the States. All those things affects you. So it doesn't matter if you're Swedish, but most Swedish people wouldn't do it in English just because they don't have an international appeal, like, or strive, or they don't have a relationship to the international community. So they wouldn't speak in English. And they limit themselves by doing that, but you know, those things affect. Like me moving out to the countryside, also something that affects like this whole YouTube thing. It makes it easier for me to kind of value that rather than pursuing like just an advertising career, for instance, which I do too, but just like a part-time thing. Yeah. Okay, let's check. Oh, let me see. Okay, I'm skipping someone. Okay, here we go. I'm a senior in HS this year, and I'm pretty much for sure. Okay, let me move this so I can look at you while I read. I'm a senior in HS this year, and I'm pretty much for sure going to film school, high school, that is HS. I realized that after this school year because my parents would not like the idea of me skipping college. How do I break out into the film industry after I finish college? From what I heard, the real way to only get into making features is by working as a PA and starting on the bottom like that. How do I use film school to help me move into features without starting at the bottom? Okay, so a couple of things. Assisting is definitely the way to go. Like, you should be eager to learn anything from anybody to kind of figure out what you want to do and also to build your network. So the more you can assist other people, being a PA or whatever it is, just think of it as a mainly building network thing and not so much you're doing this for work. Because when you do that, you're always going to see the stuff you do as worthless pretty much, because you're doing stuff that you might not, see a point in doing because you're working for somebody else and you're doing their shit chores or whatever. So if you stop seeing it like that and see it as a way or a tool for you to network and also to learn and to study what they do. So that's going to be like a good way to learn things by working as that. That I would say about the PA thing or whatever assisting type of thing you can do. And then if you go to college or if you go to school, whatever school that is, you really need to see it as something else than school. You need to see it as a platform for you to start and kickstart your career. So like start a YouTube channel, start making short films, start going to festivals, start uploading stuff and telling stories all the time. Use that time that you have in school and kind of build your own like following with people and community, build relationships online and offline, and make it as a platform for you to tell stories rather than getting a degree, because that's just bullshit. Nobody cares about that. Once you get out and start working, it's all about what you've done, what kind of show reel you have, or what kind of projects you've done before. So school doesn't matter at all, but if you use it as a platform, then that's a good thing. If you have to go there because your parent tells you to. Some people need school, some people don't. Yeah, I went to school. It was crap, but I went. Eventually I kind of figured stuff out. It wasn't the school though that helped me figure it out. Do you create a lot of content in Swedish or just your commercial work outside docs? Any tips finding jobs on creative field from Sweden? Me and my wife want to leave Finland at least for a few years. Let me think. I think most of the stuff I do is in English, or it's like several languages. I think so, at least. Like most stuff they want translated even if it's in Swedish. But sometimes it's in Swedish when it's doc, just because people aren't comfortable speaking in English for some reason. But almost all the stuff that I do is in English, I think. But almost all the stuff that I do is also Swedish brands or agencies. So most of the stuff comes out of Sweden, but they want an international appeal, or I don't know, they win prizes off of that as well. So that also like figures in or factors in. I don't know if the doc stuff, that can be a mix depending on what they want out of it. But most of the stuff that's more like, if it's like a manifesto film or if it's a TVC commercial type of thing, all those things are usually in like several languages. Mainly for the markets that they kind of operate in. So some I've done for like Finland, so we've done like Finnish voiceovers and Swedish voiceovers and British voiceovers, and yeah, I think, what else? Yeah, there's usually just the voiceovers that they change. But in terms of like what you should do, I think like a big factor is having a presence. Like for me, I get most of my work either through old connections, that is like my network growing and growing. Most of that is handled by Andre, but still it's like the network that we've built around my directing name or whatever. And then I also have like representation, so they also get a lot of work their way, and then they kind of match me to the projects that I'm a good fit for, and then I usually pitch on those. I did one today, or I sent one today, which I hopefully get, but I don't know. There's like this big director that's pitching against me, so you never know. Like probably won't get it, but it would be good if I did. And that's like a 3 or 4 day thing, creating a pitch for that. So it takes a lot of work. It's like tons of research to come up with like an original idea. So you kind of spend those 3 or 4 days just researching and creating like a presentation, and you don't know if you're gonna get it. And the more you do that, the better you get at it, but that's the way it works usually for like the bigger type of jobs. But if you want smaller type of jobs, there's so much like price dumping that's going on, so the competitiveness is like insane, especially in Stockholm. We don't want to do a lot of projects that are in that range, because you don't want to be on the lower side of things. You rather be like up here, but like sometimes we take stuff in the middle, but the stuff on the bottom, there are so many people that just want to get in, so they kind of price dump everything, and that's a very hard like market to be in if you want to survive off of it. You can do it, but then that's all you're gonna do, because you need to work all the time with those things to make it into a profession. But then I would just like reach out to PR agencies, or whatever agencies, content agencies. Content agencies have like tons of stuff and no money. It's still something, and if you can do it yourself, or if you can shoot and edit and do all those things, maybe you can kind of make it work. But they demand a lot from you for very little to no money. So I would kind of try to stay away if I can, but sometimes you can't. I got into TV because I thought that was more fun. So I started working as a DOP there and editor. So if you can go that route, then you can create like a portfolio type of thing while you kind of pursue things slowly, progresses into like a career. Or yeah, that's something that I would probably do instead. How do I use film school to help me move into features with? Oh, okay, that's what I answered. Yeah. Okay. Hello, Finland. What do you think about a used Red 1 MX camera? Can I buy it? I can buy it for, okay, so like 2K-ish. I'm not sure it's even as good as the GH5, but I might be wrong. But in terms of like picture quality, I'm not so sure that you should expect much more than that. It's not like a bad camera, but I don't think that it's like much better than a yeah, like this one, for instance, the Blackmagic cinema camera. I don't think it's much better picture quality than that. It has noisy fan, those types of things. I would try it out and see if it's something for me before I would buy it, because it's a bit of a shady thing to buy, especially if you look at what you get from a Blackmagic Pocket 4K. I would say that camera is blowing that camera out of the waters. So yeah, it depends on what you want. But in terms of like practicalities and like you have a noisy fan, you have a format that works if you have the Red Rocket card, but otherwise, yeah, it's not ideal. Yeah. Okay, so IGTV makes me mad. The vertical framing is a crime against cinema. I actually don't, I used to think that. I definitely understand where people are coming from that think that, but I'm kind of intrigued by this whole thing. Like, I don't yet want to shoot for it. Or actually I do. I want to shoot a short or something in just that. That would be kind of fun. But the thing is, like, the more you use a phone, which everybody does, right? This is how I hold it. This is how I want to hold it. I don't want to flip it like this because it's not natural. Because you drop the damn thing every time you do that. I've done it. It's all broken. Actually, it's funny with the iPhone 10 because it doesn't break the glass, it just gets black. So I have a notch on the side of the notch. Yeah, anyway. But I just think that this is the way that we consume things today. And I think it's kind of ironic that this is the way that I saw like cinema, for instance. You want to have your film in the cinema. This is the way that I saw the discussion going on when they talked about Netflix. No, you can't do Netflix, it's not cinematic, you can't show it. It's the same thing. Like, people move to other platforms. And the people that stay, they're gonna survive. Like, people still shoot on film, it's fine and all, if you're on that level and you can. And like, it looks pretty, yes, it does. Is it where people are? Is it what people care about? I doubt it. I don't think people will care that it's shot on film, even though like my pitch for the commercial that I did today has Super 8mm because of the look baked into that whole concept. It has like a purpose, but I also think that this has a purpose because this is how we watch things. And as much as I hated it before, I'm coming around to the whole idea of watching films like this and working with this as the cinematic frame. Because this is, if you use it the right way, it could be cinematic. Not the only way, but it's just one format and one place where people consume things. Do I think it's going to be like 60-minute type of stuff? Not for a long time. But maybe at some point, I don't know. Let's see if somebody else is saying anything about IGTV. No. Anybody else? Any thoughts on Prores Raw or IGTV? Let us know. I think though that IGTV has its purpose because it's the exclusive site that has that. But when I look at the app itself, I'm not at all impressed. Like, it pretty much sucks, I think. Just because it's clumsy, you don't really... So let me just mute this. You don't have a good way of discovering things. The popular stuff is usually just crap. Totally random, I don't know what it is and I don't want to watch it. The following, it's so like one type of thing right now. I don't know, it has definitely super potential, but I just don't know how I'm gonna use it yet. But that's, yeah, where I'm at on the whole thing. Okay. How do you tell a compelling story of something that already has happened? Interviews gets boring after a while. Straight away, I'd say. Huge fan, by the way. Thank you, David. Like, this is interesting because this is what all stories is about. But when you're following something, it's easier to get away with it because you just follow stuff and things happen, like life happens, and then you document it. But the thing is that any story needs a perspective, and any story needs to find like the story perspective, or what's best for this story to tell the most emotionally impactful story for this story or whatever purpose you're making it. And something that's already happened can be done in like many ways. Like, you can do animations, you can do reenactments. Man on Wire, for instance, amazing doc, that's reenactments. You can do what Werner Herzog does, which is like, I don't know how to describe it. He divides things into like documentation and truth, like truth and, yeah, I don't know, I'm probably messing all his quotes up because they're so good and they have the German accent. But anyway, he talks about truth rather than like what you document or see or what life is. So life is one thing. Whatever you're telling a story, if you're telling a cinematic work of any kind, if it's a documentary or if it's fiction or whatever it is, you're not making like this, a live stream that is this, live, and you're interacting, and that's what it is. Eventually this narrative will probably change as well to become something more than just this, live, live, live. But when you're doing something that isn't live, when you're doing something that's a narrative structured thing with dramaturgy and all, that's supposed to be told like a story, what happens then is that you need to tell the story from a perspective, because otherwise people will not be interested, it will not be engaging, it will not be something that gets them emotionally invested or affected. And that's what a good story has. It has all those things. And you need to think about like the story you're telling. How do you make whatever it is that you're kind of doing? How do you make that into like something that is true to the story, but amplifies the experience for the viewers, so that it becomes more real than, you know, what most of the stuff that you see is. So you need to kind of chase whatever the real truth is behind what you see. So for instance, if you have a scene, what people say is rarely what people mean, or what is whatever is underlying subtext of life. It's usually just like people say things, and then they think or feel or whatever they have inside of themselves could be something totally opposite. So you could say you're super happy and then you take your life the next day, that type of stuff. It's the same with everything when you tell stories. You shouldn't say the stuff that is like the story or what people mean. You should play with the cinematic language, and that's what you need to do when you have stuff that's already been told. You need to figure out like, what's the most effective way for your story to tell that in a more interesting way. And whatever that is, like if it's like, oh, everything is done by a phone call, or everything is done by reenactments or animation, or I don't know, maybe it's just like a suggestive type of feel to something. It could be anything. It could be just macro shots of something. You need to figure those things out that make sense for your story, and then you definitely kind of find that whole thing. Jacob, thanks for the super chat. I don't really know how the super chat works, which is kind of strange because I just added it the last time, but I have a super chat. I'm gonna figure this out. I'm gonna prioritize anybody that has the super chat and ask questions. So let me know if that's a good or bad thing. I think that's the only way to make sense of all that. Okay, so I'm interested in shooting commercials and docs. How do you find projects to camera operate in the beginning? I'm currently freelancing as a photographer and VT on commercials. I think the best way is definitely to get a reel together and to get projects that gets noticed together, and to start collaborating with one or two directors, or start to work with, like, partner up with people. That's the best way to get work, because if you partner up with somebody that's interesting or that already has like a career going, then that's an easier way to do it. If you can't do that, assist someone, like be their gaffer assistant or something like that. Usually just like build networks. That's the best way. But also do make projects that makes an impact. Like the best thing is to do stuff that wins prizes. That's very unlikely that you'll do that before you get any work. But then you can also do like shorts. You can do stuff that is like an Instagram page that shows your style or what type of DOP you are. Like curate that and use that as your calling card or website. Yeah. Okay, let me just check. I can probably answer something while I check, but I had some question here as well. Okay, next question. 6D Mark II or A7 III? I don't like the Sonys, but maybe the Sony actually. I think that like if you want autofocus, go with Canon. If you want light sensitivity, go with Sony. Yeah, that's probably like the biggest things I'd say. But autofocus, if that's a thing, then definitely the Canon. And the Sony isn't terrible, but I think, but it's not fantastic either. But then I'll also say, do never trust autofocus. Like I don't want to use autofocus. I rather shoot on like apertures that makes it possible for me to move. Like so. I should be here though. This is sharper. A little bit unsharp, but still sharp enough. Sharp. Yeah, you get the point. Okay, when is the film gonna be finished, and do you plan to publish it on YouTube or somewhere else? Somewhere else probably. Like I'm hoping for Netflix for like an original, either series or film. We don't know yet, but these things take time, and like now we're putting together. It's actually coming along really good, but the whole like sizzle reel, and then that's going to like some people that we know at Netflix that are original programmers there, and then also to the agents. So then we'll see what happens, but that's like the first step. And then if we kind of get a hook there, somebody bites, and you know we reel that in, then maybe it's gonna like speed up the whole process. But otherwise these things can take like 2 years or 3 years or even a lifetime for some people, but hopefully just 2 years or something. But if it actually goes through faster than that, then you know things can speed up and it can be done in like a year or a year and a half or something. Otherwise, if we don't get that, because I want an originals deal, or I'm not so interested in Netflix. If we don't get that, then we pursue like our other options, which is probably gonna be, what do you know, like Amazon Prime or YouTube. Like YouTube makes the most sense, but since they're focusing so much of their original content on like younger kids-ish, like 12-year-olds or something like that, it doesn't really make sense there. But I would hope that they did more grown-up stuff, because like that platform is my favorite platform, or this platform that we're on is my favorite platform. But that doesn't mean that they understand this older generation, or they just don't focus on it. That's unfortunate, but they would be my favorite pick if they actually got their shit together in terms of doing originals. Probably do a short, probably do a doc, like short doc or something on the way though. So just to kind of get the story out and get it going somehow. Probably won't do a series, because we're gonna do this behind the scenes series during now and like until it's done, and probably after as well. So yeah. Do you have any tricks that helps you to watch your own edits from a neutral point of view? By that I mean you've filmed it and then you've watched it while you edit, and how do you make sure it makes sense to your audience? And then how often are you getting feedback from others during the editing process? So it's different. If you do like commercials, there's like a natural back and forth with the client first, and then, or with the agency first, and then the client eventually. So that's one thing. Before I even send it, I go through myself and do that whole thing. And that process usually looks like you have to kind of filter everything out. So you have an idea and you try things and you test things and you test your story and you see what works. It's pretty straightforward to kind of shape the first like rough cut of things. But then like the second process is starting to filter stuff out. So usually this is something that I see people on YouTube lack. Is usually, if you do a tutorial or whatever you do, you don't cut it down as short as it should be. So you don't cut out all the repetitions. Like most tutorials have, like they say the same thing like 3 or 4 times. And those things you need to filter out in order for like it feeling like a story that's snappy and all that. You need to filter all the stuff that is like repetition or that is clouding the story itself. So what is it that you're trying to say? If they talk about something else that more distracts than adds to that, then you need to kind of cut that out and try to filter those things out. And that takes like several of iterations and versions before you get that out. And usually when you do YouTube, you don't have that time, but that's something that you actually can get much quicker to spot. And if you're working a lot with dramaturgy or that sort of thing, it's much easier to see that. And usually when I do like long form stuff, I work with a dramaturg or like a story consultant, I think they're often called, which is basically an editor that helps out assisting me as an editor. So usually I want to have somebody on board that does that. And then I also send it out to people I know and just ask them to watch it. That's like random feedback. But usually, I think I rarely get like that type of good feedback from random people that I send it to. It's more of a confirmation that it works than like developing it. That's at least how it's been so far. But then when you send it to like a professional storyteller, they can actually see things and clear things up that you can't really see, because you get clouded judgment a lot of the time. And even though like you can get good at it, you can never see everything. You need to have people from the outside coming in and discussing things with you. And you need to take also time off, walk away from stuff, come back to it. Don't just sit and edit, drink a couple of glasses of wine and sit at it all night. That's not the way to go. Like, leave your stuff. A funny thing is that I think Walter Murch does this also, but like I can go, before I start editing, I can go for days just thinking about the story and what it is without editing. I can just like watch material, walk away, like not be stressed about it at all. Eventually you get a little bit stressed about it, but usually just like let it kind of marinate to a point where you feel like, okay, yeah. And then you can sit and edit, and then it's going to be much clearer and much faster for you to kind of piece things together. Because sometimes, like most ad stuff that I do, you really need to just go in and do it. There's no like hesitation there. And sometimes, like now when I was in Yukon, I came back to Toronto, I actually wanted to just flush out an idea I had for the sizzle reel type of thing. And then I went back here and I kind of finalized that, and now I've left it. Now probably I'm not going to touch it for probably like a week or 2 weeks or something like that. And then I go back to it and I start working on it again, because then you have some space to the whole stuff that you did and all that. I do watch it from time to time in between, but I don't want to do anything just because I want to have the distance to the whole thing and see it with like fresh eyes and let things like the stuff eventually just filters out by themselves when you do that. And I feel that's a much more effective way of doing it. But then, yeah, as much feedback as you can get. It usually doesn't give you the solutions to problems, but it can kind of help you define them. So if people get hung up on one thing, they're definitely not going to come with your, like the way that you want to create or solve the problem that is there. But they're going to identify the problem that you can then go in and kind of figure out how to do it. Where are we at? Let me see. Oh, so many questions. I'm not going to be able to get to all these. So let me just pick some. Okay, so a question about the film. Rise asks, hey Jonny, I've just arrived on the live. Have you talked about the doc with Maddie? I don't think I have talked that much about the story. So what was the topic of doing this project? So, did I make a film that talked a little bit about it? I think I did. Maybe check last video on it, like the vlog stuff. But so I had an idea that I wanted to do like a climate change type of doc, but I hate climate change and environmental activism and all those things. So it's both like something that interests me because I do care about the environment. I just think that all the discussions around it is so polarized and stupid most of the time. So I just wanted to make like a story that kind of explores that, but through human stories. So not like, oh, this is the good side, this is the bad side, that type of thing. Just letting them say whatever they say and letting them just live their lives and see how they're affected. But what the climate change thing is has kind of, I don't know, become like a lethal thing to talk about. So now I'm more kind of interested in like the global responsibilities of people that extract resources from communities that they're not a part of, or like in where they're not native. That's probably what it's going to be evolved into. But it started out as like, okay, so how do we kind of make a film about climate change without it being climate activism? But now I feel like it's much more interesting to focus on that topic, which is like a large thing. But then it's like a global aspect of everything. So it's like following in Sweden, in Norway, in South Africa, and in Canada to try to get like an international perspective of it. So you have like socialist Sweden, you have capitalistic Norway, and then you have like Canada, which is like, I don't know, somewhere in between whatever Norway and Sweden is, or maybe more like Norway, I would guess. I'm not sure though. Somebody probably knows. There's a fly here. And then in South Africa, just like a developed country, but then still like a country with issues. So to have that, like different places in the world, you could do like many places, but that's the stuff that we picked out of this whole world that we live in. Go away. But then now that we got to Kino, I was just like, maybe it's just a series. Maybe it's not a film. Maybe it's a series. So it evolves all the time. I don't really know what it's going to end up being. But the starting ground was that. So it will change like all the time as we find the characters and meet with them. And that's what you should be kind of open to. Like when you meet with them, when you start filming, don't do your idea that you had coming in. Do whatever the idea is that it like presents itself to you. Would you switch a GH5 with the Blackmagic Pocket 4K or the GH5S for filmmaking, not vlogging? I would go with the Blackmagic 4K just because of like workflow and XLR. That's a big thing if you want to make films. GH5 is a great camera for somebody that can't hold a camera steady. I have that skill, so I can actually hold a camera without stabilizer steady. That's fine and all, but it doesn't have a flip screen. So if that's something that you really want, then the GH5 would be your pick, or the GH5S would be your pick. Because I was thinking about the GH5S just because of the light sensitivity, but then when they released the Pocket 4K, I was just like, yep, this is what I want. Is it possible to be a filmmaker if you're not living in the area where there is a film industry? Absolutely, yeah. A lot of people have created film communities where they live, and you just need to get together with the people that do want to make stuff. And then you can bring people in, like actors and all that, and people can learn how to make films. That's usually how it goes. I just think that you need to kind of inspire people to want to do it, and you need to go together as a group of people that are interested in these things. Start like a study group or like a, I don't know, NGO type of thing, and do that. If you live in that type of country that has that support. I'm an American in Finland. Should I do content with Finnish subs or dub? I would just forget about Finland. No, but Finnish people know English, so it doesn't make sense to do the work. Same for Sweden. I would never like care about the few persons that don't know English. they're probably not going to watch my channel anyways. So I would just go for English and go for the bigger market. If you have something that's super local, then it makes sense to do stuff in Finnish or Swedish. But if it's not super local, then I would always go with the international one. Okay, so I have an idea. What about shooting the 9:16 divided into 16:9 angle? One scene, 3 angles, like 2D VR. I'm a bit slow. Wait for it. 3 angles, 1 scene, 3 angles. I don't understand this. What about shooting the 9:16 divided into... Oh, so 3. Now I get it. A bit slow, I know. Okay. I don't know if you mean for resolution or what's the reasoning for it. Because it's still going to be a 16:9 thing. I'm guessing. But anything that's like playing with something will evolve into something. So do that if you want to do that. Okay, Alex, what do you think about uploading videos you make for YouTube on Facebook and IGTV as well? What's the reason people don't upload the same video on all platforms? All the best from London. I wouldn't do that because this I would probably do, but the stuff that's 235 won't do well on Facebook. And for IGTV, I would definitely do the portrait mode. That's what it's made for. And I think that you will have a hard time getting people to care about anything that isn't specifically made for that. I've tried that now with like teasers for this. I'll probably do that for the episode that's coming out tomorrow as well from Yukon. Do like a teaser type of thing. Then it's just like 15 seconds for the stories that I made. But now I'm probably making that for IGTV as well, because it's the same format. But I just like when IGTV picks up and it becomes a thing, it still doesn't have a lot of views, I feel. So when people actually start using it, it's going to be interesting to see where this is going, because it is a native way of watching stories on a phone. And it's gonna present like different options of how to tell a story, I feel. I just don't like filming like this. I think that's kind of, does not make much sense to me. But watching it like this does. So okay, let me see. Okay, let me see. Can I pick a perfect last question to end this? Let's see. Yeah, people are asking about the Blackmagic camera. I actually talked about it earlier, so anybody that want to know that, it's in this, but back. Okay, so I'll end this with talking a little bit more about the doc. So Noah Kane, I would love to hear more about the documentary I did with Maddie. What specifically about the conversation around climate change has gone wrong? I agree that it's very polarizing. Yeah, like the big thing is that it's so polarized that people aren't communicating with each other, right? So people bring up statistics on one side and like the whole thing is that like, okay, climate change is probably real. But do you know that for real there is like this study that you can point to or whatever it is? I believe it's real, but I don't have that statistic that I can point to. And even if I have it, can I actually point that this is for real? Like even though you say, okay, so 97% or whatever it is, climate scientists say it's for real, still there's always questions. Any other place in the world, people would not question it, right? When 90% of the science community agrees to something, it's for real. But at the same time, the reason why it's getting conflicting is because they always bring out, like, they cherry pick what they want to talk about. So the climate scientist isn't saying that the world isn't changing by itself, like natural causes are a factor, but they're saying that we're also affecting it. And somehow it gets cherry picked and it gets polarized when it gets cherry picked. So the opposite side, they will say that, okay, this is what it is, by taking the arguments and picking them and just like talking about them. But kind of, it's like the racism debate in Sweden and probably the US as well, where you get people just like, they only have their own agenda and they don't have like the mankind agenda. That's at least what I feel. So because it's so polarized, I just feel like it's such a sensitive topic to talk about. So when Leonardo DiCaprio makes a film like Before the Flood, I just think that anybody that is on the opposite side will just like shut off. They won't listen at all to that whole argument because it's so polarized. And it doesn't have a purpose then when it has that type of effect. That's so much of like the whole conflict that I see in the subject, where you're not going back to the roots of the whole topic, where you're not looking at like, so for instance, let's take like South Africa as an example. So supposedly, maybe, this isn't like proven or anything, but there's a big chance that the mining that's been going on there has affected the water crisis that's there. So partly it's probably like climate is changing, it's drying out, and there's like harsher summers and the rain isn't coming as often, but it's also affected because they've kind of taken the water and they've done the mining and that's affected it as well. But when you talk about it, it gets conflicted because you only pick what you want to talk about, and like one side is only talking about what they want to talk about. And what I'm interested in is not that at all. It's just like the human story within that conflict itself. So the human that is living there, what's their lives like now? And how has that changed? And I think those stories are much more important because those kind of, they move us away from that whole political debate around things that's just like bullshit most of the time, and it moves us towards like more like understanding the real issues behind it. That was the starting ground of everything. And then it's the same in like all these places. It's very conflicting. If you look at Kino, like the whole community is just like pissed at each other and nobody can kind of communicate with each other. And because there's different, people come from different places and with different values and with different ways of making a living and with different purposes in life, and then they can't really kind of come together as a community. And that's, to me, what the whole story is about. It's just like, these things are the problem just as much as the climate itself. Like the bullshit is the problem as well. Okay, so thanks for watching. See you the next time. And yeah, episode coming out tomorrow. Bye-bye. Oh yeah, I don't have to shut this off. I can just stop here. Stop right now. Stop streaming. Bye.